Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Charlene. Hi, team. Hi, Key.
Good morning.
Hi.
Shalom.
Good morning, good afternoon for everybody. Um, so this is part 3. We're gonna it's our third interview, let's say, our third meeting, but it's part 2 of the presentation that we're having, comparing the covenant calendar with the Enoch, Zadok, and Essene calendar. So this is part 2. So whoever hasn't watched part 1, maybe stop here and go back and watch part 1, even though Charlene will do a bit of a synopsis of what you presented on part 1. And Tim, you will pick up from where we left the presentation, finish it, and then we'll have lots and lots of time for lots and lots of questions.
Very good.
Okay, so in part 1, Maria had a really, really good question, and that was about Passover. And why isn't Passover always on the third cycle or a Tuesday? And in the Enoch, Zadok type calendars, the Dead Sea Scroll calendars, most of them, maybe not all of them, because there's quite a few varieties, but most of them have Passover locked every single year to a Tuesday Passover. So we were going to show everyone how that isn't always the case. But we started out with Moses in Exodus 12 with Egypt. And yes, that year it was a Tuesday Passover. And what we wanted to do was go all the way around, count out the year, and then get to the second year and to pick up and show where Passover landed on the second year in the wilderness. But we didn't get that far. So we're going to pick up the last little part. We were, I think we were counting the Omer count. We were ready to do we had counted the Omer count to 50, which also affected the wave sheaf placement and the Shavuot or Pentecost placement. So we were looking at a couple of things that were a little bit different. But we went on to show that there was a false count, another 49 days, but we're going to back up, Maria. We're going to start back a little bit and then move forward. And so, I don't know, Tim, should I tell them where Passover is going to land in the second year, or should I just wait? Because we're going to count it out. We're going to count out all the days. And we say that 360 days is how many days were in the year from Genesis 1. There's some that say it's 364. But we're going to count it out to 360 and show everyone what happens, not only in the first month of the second year in the wilderness, but also what happens in the second month of that second year. There's something special that happens with the cloud and how Yahuwah lifts the cloud, and that is the signal that they're going to move their camp. So there's some really interesting clues in there. I think it's from Numbers chapter 10. So I think with that, we're ready to go. And we'll just sort of pick up in the middle there. And yes, questions are good. We're going to start with this slide. I know that you remember it. But if you have questions along the way, just stop us and we'll just stop right there.
Okay.
And also, I just wanted to make one more mention that at the bottom of the slides, lots of times there'll be a link there that shows that this study came from another source, and there are all huge studies. So we were just kind of hitting the high points, and that's sometimes why there's lots of questions, because we haven't done a full, complete study. But Tim he'll expound on that.
Yes, these slides are the high points of many studies, very in-depth studies. So we're just hitting the high points, if you will. I want to also mention that one of the major points behind this short study here is to ascertain the importance of the shadow, the equinox shadow, when it is, what it does, the importance of it, and that, according to Scripture, the next day after the equinox shadow is New Year Day. That's one of the high points that we need to get through here. So let's begin here. We're going to back up again just a little bit here and do a restart, just commit a bit of a review as Charlene had mentioned. Entering the wilderness of Sinai, Exodus 19:1. In the 3rd month, after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt, on this day, and we have it underlined for a very specific reason. The word day is yom. On this yom, that is a day that is not a date. Yes, it was the 15th when they left Egypt, but the scripture here in this verse directly pinpoints a day of the week. That would be a Wednesday in common terms as we understand it today. On this day, they came into the wilderness of Sinai. The Omer count for Sivan 1 is day 43 of 50. So when they entered here into the Sivan 1, it was day 43 of the Omer count. Because Shavuot is on the 50th day, and Shavuot is Pentecost for those that are not sure of the Hebrew word, because Pentecost is on the 50th day, we can eliminate Sivan 15. The 15th is down here. We can eliminate the 15th as one of the choices for when Israel entered the wilderness of Sinai. The 15th is not before Shavuot, and it is not a Wednesday. That is why it is eliminated. You'll see this red box coming up here. Sivan 15 is not acceptable, not an acceptable candidate for the day and or date of entering the wilderness of Sinai for Pentecost. So let's stay with Omer count 46 right here. This is the day of the week that they entered into the wilderness, the middle of the week. And they entered here on the 4th of Sivan. This is what's recorded in the scripture. What is the difference with the other calendars? Well, let's look at Zadok. Zadok honors Shavuot on the 15th day of the 3rd month. Zadok goes with a date, not a day. I do not understand how come that when it says here day, Yom, Zadok inserts the 15th as a date. How that works, I do not understand. But we like to stick exactly with the words of the scripture. It declares a day, and we see that as a day of the week. Oops. So Zadok honors Shavuot on the 15th day of the 3rd month. Does this date align with the details given in Exodus 19:1? When Zadok's Omer count begins a week late, Omer 50 is on the 15th day of the 3rd month. That would be down here on the 15th day of the 3rd month. The 15th is not the same day of the week as when the children left Egypt. They left Egypt on the middle day of the week, which was a Wednesday in common terms, so we understand. We are now ready to count the rest of the 360 days to see where the next Passover will be. But first, let's check out another Omer count, the Omer count of 99 days and what it represents, because there are people that declare another 50-day count to the Omer, making it a 99-day count. So we're coming into this vertical style of chart, and I'm going to explain it here a little bit better so that we can understand. This is month number 2, of course, it says there. You'll see on the left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the 7th day Sabbath is marked out with blue. There's a line across the date of the month, the 30th day of the month is marked out in blue. The Omer count on this day of the month is marked out in blue because it's on the 7th day Sabbath. And the cycle of the year is also marked out in blue so that we can have linear alignment here. You'll note that on this Omer count, you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it's marked in blue also. So it represents the days of the week. Also, whoops, I keep pressing the wrong buttons. So this is marked out in blue for linear alignment. This is for accuracy so that we can, like, it's very easy when you're making these charts to mess up with these numbers so that we have different ways of making sure that there's no mess up with the numbers. So let's go to the information here. In the 3rd month, after the children of Yisrael had come out of Mitzrayim, on this day, as in day of the week, they came into the wilderness of Sinai. That's what's written in Exodus 19:1. Day, not date. So we'll come over here. This is the days of the week. It's the 4th day of the week, which we understand as a Wednesday in common terms. This is the day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. They had one more day to travel to get to the base of Sinai. That's what happened on the 5th day of the 3rd month. When they were at the base, they arrived at the base of Sinai. Moshe went up the mountain to receive the message from Yahuwah. Yahuwah said to Moshe, "Go to the people and kadosh them today and tomorrow." So this was the first of 3 days. This is the day. It was a Friday in common terms, preparation day. Note that, preparation day. Yahuwah had this timed for a purpose. They were to prepare to meet their Creator. And he said, "Go to the people, kadosh them today and tomorrow," which would be a 7th-day Sabbath. "For on the 3rd day, being the 1st day of the week, which would be the 50th day count, and it would be the end of the count, which was finished on the 49 days, your 7th completed Sabbath. For on this 3rd day, Yahuwah will come down upon Mount Sinai before the eyes of the people." Now they were commanded to cleanse themselves. In other words, do your laundry. Get your tent clean. Whatever is in your tent, have it organized, have it cleaned out from idols. Remove those idols, remove those things that interfere with your relationship with Yahuwah. Cleanse your dwelling on day 1. Day 2, they were to kadosh themselves. Kadosh, cleanse your inner mind. Remove your psychological obstacles that impair your relationship with your Creator. Prepare to meet your Creator spiritually on the 7th-day Sabbath. Because on the 3rd day, that is the 50th day count of the Omer, on this day, which is Pentecost or Shavuot, this is when Yahuwah is going to come down on the mount. This is what happened. This is what is written in the scripture. Now, again, down here, you will see the link to the study that goes through this in detail, in great, great detail. So moving on to the next slide here. The event happened. The Omer count 50 occurred. Yahuwah come down upon the mount. And Moshe received the 10 commandments there. But because we have been told that there is an extra 50-day count to the Omer, we're going to investigate this. We're going to investigate it very, very clearly because we want to prove whether it's right or whether it's wrong. So let's keep counting to see where these extra 49 days extend to. You'll notice this red column with numbers. This is the count it's the second 49-day count, or second 50-day count, however you want to term it. This is the second count in red for an alarm. Pay attention. Let's have a look and see what's here. So far, we have 28 extra counting days past the Omer 50 count. Let's go through this. Here's month number 4. We came up to 49. This is the end of the second count of the 7 completed Sabbaths. You'll notice it's on a 7th-day Sabbath. It's marked in blue, and it is the 49th day count, the second count. The 49th cycle of the second Omer count, it is the 7th completed week of the false Omer count, and this has been accomplished. What happens next? Note here, it's the 4th month. It's the 27th day of the month. What happens? Moshe was commanded by Yahuwah to get back to his camp. There was some strange sounds coming from that camp. The erroneously extended Omer count dogma accurately achieves identifying the exact cycle when Moshe came down from the mount. He shattered the tablets, illustrating his contempt after witnessing the festival of the golden calf. Moshe was not happy. He was absolutely livid. Why? It was the breaking of the covenant that was occurring on there. So when people want to declare a second count to the Omer and observe Shavuot on this date, on this false Omer count, they are in effect observing the breaking of the covenant. They're observing the golden calf festival. That is what is occurring. So let's continue with this count through the 360-day year. We're going to find out what the importance of the shadow of the equinox is, why it's so important, what does it have to do, why is it that Yahuwah commanded Moshe to raise the tabernacle on the first day of the second year in the wilderness? What effect will the equinox have on that? So for the next several slides, we're going to keep counting Yahuwah's calendar to the 12th month, the 360th day. And you'll notice here, we have the counts all broken up in the 7-day weeks. Here is the 30th day of the month. It's the 5th month. It's the 5th count of 30 days, and it equals 150 days of the year at this point. This is just so we keep things accurate. And again, here's a video link to go through this in detail. Here's your 6th month, and we're just going to go through these slides fairly quickly. Here is the 6th month up here, the 30th day. The next day is the 7th month. It's trumpets. There's the first day of the month. And we count 10 days. It's atonement. Count to 15 days. And this starts Sukkot, just so we understand. Counting. Psalms 90 verse 12. Teach us to number our days and let us bring the heart to wisdom. Why doesn't it say, teach us to observe the phases of the moon? Why is that not there? Why does it say, teach us to number our days? So we're going through here, and you'll notice we have the Shemini Atzeret. This is the last great day of Sukkot. That's marked out here. Continuing on through the 8th month and through the 9th month right here. This little guy, he's doing his counting. That's what we need to do. Here's the 9th month. Keep on going through all the numbers. We're counting. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing. Month number 10. Month number 11. Coming up. Number 11. There's your numbers for number 11. Month number 11. Wow. This is touchy this morning. Month number 11. We're going through that and month number 11 finishes. There's 11 months of 30, 330 days. We know we have some accuracy there. Month number 12, this is the last month of the year. What happens? Teshuvah. I want you to remember this word, teshuvah. The meaning of this word is a turning, and it can be applied to various things. When this word is applied to the Kufa circuit, the circuit of the sun in the Mazzaroth, we know this as the day of the equinox, the turning of the celestial bodies. On the day of the equinox, you can measure this day by observing the shadow. It is the shadow that we understand which controls time. And we see that in the incident of Hezekiah and the sundial, recorded in the scripture several times. So when you see this word teshuvah, think equinox and think shadow. That's how it's determined. The equinox shadow is the last cycle of the year. That would be 360. In this year, this Tekufa shadow is seen on a preparation day. This is the count, a preparation. Why does Yahuwah have this organized so that the Teshuvah shadow, or the equinox shadow, this is the turning point, why does he have this organized so that the shadow is seen on the preparation day? What is it that there is a preparation for? What is so important about this preparation? Note here, on this preparation, Moshe staked out the measurements on the ground according to the shadow light for proper tent of meeting orientation. What is it about this equinox shadow that is so important? When you understand the operation of this shadow, the sun rises due east, takes a direct course across the sky, and settles due west. It does not deviate from a straight line. It is a straight shadow line. That line has an absolute perfect accuracy from going east to west. Why is that important? Why is that? Why was the foundation of the tent of meeting laid out on preparation day, being the 360th day of the year? Why was that so important? The importance of orienting the dwelling place for the tabernacle, the wilderness tabernacle, the importance of laying it out accurately is clearly understood from Solomon's temple. The orientation was specifically determined by the cycle of the Teshuvah, or the equinox. The light of the sun on the Teshuvah, or equinox, is a turning. That cycle was to, let me back up. The light of the sun on the Teshuvah, on that cycle, was to enter into the Kodesh place. On the day before and on the day after, that light from the sun would not enter the Kodesh place. We understand this from Solomon's temple with the entrance pillars of Yachin and Boaz. On the day before and the day after, the sun would strike the two pillars. It would not enter the Kodesh place. But on the day of the Teshuvah, or the equinox, that sun would enter into the Kodesh place, the most holy. Very important. Let's look at the next slide here. The Teshuvah is, or the equinox, is the last cycle of the year, being 360 at this time. On this preparation, you'll notice over here, it's a preparation. On this preparation, Moshe staked out their measurements on the ground according to the shadow light for the proper tent of meeting orientation. The next cycle number 1. This is New Year cycle number 1. Notice it's on a 7th-day Sabbath. On this next cycle, Yahuwah's Shabbat, the command was to raise the tabernacle. We read that in Exodus 40, verse 2. Yahuwah's work, raise the tent of meeting on his premier moed. Now, I was raised in a very, very strict Sabbath-keeping family. And I was taught you do no work on the 7th-day Sabbath, none, zero, period. When I discovered this, that Moshe raised the tabernacle on the 7th-day Sabbath, I was shocked. I stared at this for a long time. I had a very difficult time accepting that Moshe would raise the tabernacle on the 7th-day Sabbath. Then I need to look at when the showbread of the tabernacle was made. The showbread was replaced every 7th-day Shabbat morning. Work. Bake the showbread on the 7th-day Sabbath. When we do the work of Yahuwah by his command, that work of righteousness is acceptable to do on the 7th-day Sabbath. Now, note here that the teshuvah, the turning of the celestial bodies, or the equinox, produced a shadow on the preparation day. It was the preparation for the foundation of the tabernacle to be laid out in strict accordance with the shadow, so that the sun would mark out the day of the teshuvah, and so that the next year, the New Year cycle was number 1. The New Year cycle is the day after the equinox shadow. That is the example given in Scripture by Moshe. So let's move on here. We're coming to Moses' Passover wilderness in the 2nd year. Again, we're going to mark this out. The Teshuvah shadow was on day 360, the last day of the year. The 7th-day Sabbath is New Year's Day, and the sanctuary was raised up here. Now, I want to mark out very, very clearly by the count. When you count the days, the Passover in the 2nd year in the wilderness, the Passover was on the 6th cycle of the week, or a Friday, as we understand in common terms. Passover on a Friday. Scripture documentation ensures Passover was on a 6th cycle of the week in this year. A Friday Passover. What does that do with Zadok? Zadok, Enoch, Qumran, Essene, those calendars declare that Passover can only be on a 3rd cycle of the week. It can only be on a Tuesday every year, period, in their calendar. They demand this. This is what they stand by, in opposition to the numerous examples of Passover being on different days of the week in Scripture. This is the difference in their calendar. They declare Passover is always on a Tuesday. What does that do with alignment for Scripture? They also declare that the New Year's Day, head of the year, as they say it here, is always on a Wednesday, always in their calendar. Yet when we go to Scripture and you count out the days exactly as commanded, New Year's Day, the day of raising the tabernacle in the wilderness, was on a 7th-day Sabbath. Serious differences between the Scripture and Zadok's calendar. Serious differences. With a very simple count from Egypt's Passover, the Passover in this 2nd year is celebrated on Friday, the 6th cycle, not on a Zadok Tuesday. But this covenant count will also go on to disprove the displacement or I should say disprove the placement of the lunar Sabbaths falling on only the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th. We're going to be looking at that shortly. But let's look at this. There was no first fruits kept in the wilderness. There's no documentation of it. First fruits would have been over here if it had been kept, but it was not documented. So let's continue on. Again, I'm going to read this, but this covenant count will also go on to prove that the lunar Sabbaths falling on the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th, this is not scriptural, not according to what we count out. So let's look at it. The lunar Sabbaths follow a moon phase and are also fixed to a date and or dates. All lunar Shabbat calendars do not count the first day of the month. How is it that Yahuwah said, teach us to number our days? And yet, we are instructed by the lunar Shabbat calendar, you do not count the first day of the month. Number 2, they fix the weekly Sabbaths to the 8th, the 15th, 22nd, and 29 cycles of the lunar month, coinciding with the 4 main lunar phases. 1 week each month will have more than 6 working days before a Shabbat. More than 6 working days before a Shabbat. What does that do to the example of the manna week, where they had 6 working days before a Shabbat? No more and no less. You got to think about that. In this lunar system, no one can decide if the months begin with either the conjunction, the first crescent, or the full moon. There is no consensus on that. Everybody has their own system. It's confusion. But let's continue with the count here. This is the count where we saw that the tabernacle was raised on the first day of the new year, being a seventh-day Sabbath. This is the month number 1, year number 2, and we're continuing with that same count. So we count to Passover on the 14th. Of course, remember, it was on the Friday, the 6th cycle of the week. Here, the 7th-day Sabbath is on the 15th. You'll notice this neat little squiggle mark here. It marks out Sabbaths on the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th. I point that out because, look, Shabbat on the 15th, the 22nd, and 29th, exactly as the lunar Shabbat calendar requires. The question is here, can we expect the same fixed Moedim next month as the lunar Shabbat requirement demands? Will it be the same? Yahuwah declares of his patterns, I shall not change. We see that in Malachi 3:6. Will Yahuwah's pattern change with the Shabbat next month? Let's count it out. Again, here's these neat little squiggle marks. It's a 7th-day Sabbath here. The Shabbat pattern is different than the fixed 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th lunar requirement. See, they have the 8th, they have the 15th, and the 29th is not on this chart. But as you will see, their requirement for a Shabbat on these dates does not coincide with the Torah. It does not work out. They cannot find linear alignment with the words of the scripture. So the question is it possible that the fixed lunar Shabbat requirement did not originate from Yahuwah? We say, count on it, because you cannot find the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th always being a Shabbat in the scripture. You cannot find that rule. It does not work. The 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th are common days many, many times. And we're going to be looking at that real soon. The when of Yahuwah's cloud in Numbers 10, verse 11. Remember, this is the count. The tabernacle was raised here on the 7th-day Sabbath. And the Friday Passover in the second year, once they were in the second year once when they were in the wilderness, right here. This is the count. So this is the second month, right up here. And it starts out on the first right here. Note the 20th over here. We do your count. And remember, this is the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th. According to the lunar count, these are supposed to be seventh-day Sabbaths. That is their demand. Let's look at it. Numbers 10:11 tells us something special happens on this day, on the 20th. What happened on the 20th? Mark out that it is a seventh-day Sabbath on the count according to Scripture. When we read that verse, and it came to be on the 20th day of the second month, in the second year, that the cloud was taken up from above the dwelling place of the witness. The cloud was taken up on the 20th. Numbers 10, verse 33. So they set out from the mountains of Yahuwah on a journey of 3 days. A journey of 3 days. Mark that, very important. And the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah went before them for the 3 days' journey to seek out a resting place for them. They were already in a resting place. They were seeking out another one, 3 days' journey away. Note here, there is no evidence in the Torah of Yahuwah asking the people to travel on the weekly Shabbat. We do not find that in the Torah. So on the 20th, on the seventh-day Sabbath, the cloud was lifted. Here is the 3 days that they were required to travel. Again, the cloud was lifted, signaling their first journey. On the next dawn, over here, the next dawn, it was time to travel for 3 days, showing the 22nd was not celebrated as a Shabbat, according to lunar requirement. The lunar Shabbat keepers claim for the monthly Sabbaths on the 8th, over here, the 15th, and the 22nd, and the 29th days of the month. That is their requirement for their Sabbaths. Yet here in Scripture, the Hebrew nation was required to be traveling on this day. Yahuwah would not require them to travel on a Shabbat, on a seventh-day Shabbat. If you remember when they crossed the Red Sea and they come up the next morning out of the sea and saw the dead Egyptians on the beach, that was a seventh-day Sabbath when they rested and they were rejoicing. The seventh-day Sabbath is not a time for travel for personal reasons. Yahuwah would not require them to be traveling on the 22nd of the month if it was a Shabbat. It was not a Shabbat in this year. How many times can you find a lunar requirement that fails in the Scripture and still adhere to that tradition? Just a question. The 20th was a seventh-day Shabbat. The next dawn begins the new week. The first cycle of the second year was a Shabbat. The command was to raise up the dwelling place of Yahuwah. Thus they carried out the command of righteousness. Here in the wilderness, the cloud lifted, and the nation of Israel had to pack up their belongings, burden their pack animals, and pack up the tent of appointment. Women, children, and men had to walk 3 days with their personal burdens and move their livestock to find another resting place. Was moving their personal residences an act of righteousness on the 22nd, on a supposed lunar Shabbat? Where do we find a written example of the Hebrew nation traveling on a Shabbat? We do not find that. Join us next time as there are 4 more huge examples of where Passover is placed on other weekdays than just a Tuesday. This is in opposition to the Zadok and Enoch calendars. Joshua and Yahusha's testimonies must align with Moshe in the Torah. And I say shalom to each and every one of you. And if you have questions, please send your questions and your responses to questions@studythecalendar.com, and we will be very happy to assist you with answers. Don't let these locked calendars box you in. The calendar of Yahuwah, the covenant calendar, is not a locked calendar as the same style in the Zadok and the Enoch and Qumran and the Essene calendars. It is not locked. The calendar of the covenant is a different calendar altogether. It was blood ratified on Mount Sinai. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Okay. One question from the second part of your presentation. You're saying that there are people who observe an extra 50 Omer days till the celebration, the Golden Calf festival. Who are these people? I've never heard of that thing before.
If you go to Leviticus 23, and let me bring it up.
Leviticus, how much?
Leviticus 23, chapter 23. And I'm going to read to you from one of the verses here, speaking about the count to the Omer. And I'm going to read to you from English, naturally.
Mm-hmm.
There's a problem with the translation here. Leviticus 23, verse 16. And this is just one technicality that most people do not understand. Verse 16.
Mm-hmm.
Till the morrow after the seventh Sabbath, you count 50 days. Days, plural.
Mm-hmm.
Then you shall bring a new grain offering to Yahuwah. When people look at this, 50 days, it's plural. And people want to understand that as a second count to the Omer. When you look at the Hebrew, the word in Hebrew, that is yom. It is not plural. Until the morrow after the seventh Sabbath, when you look at that word until, it's ad, and it means up unto the very point of. Until the morrow after that seventh Sabbath, you count 50 day. And now that doesn't sound too good in English. We say it a little bit differently. But we could understand that as you count the 50th day, because the word is yom. Again, it's not plural. Yet here in English, we see it pluralized, and it is a definite problem.
Can you please read verse 15 and 16 together?
Yes. And verse 15.
Mm-hmm.
And from the morrow after the Shabbat, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering,
Mm-hmm.
you shall count for yourselves 7 completed Shabbatot.
Mm-hmm.
That's weeks. Until the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, you count 50 days. That's what it says here in Scripture. That's what we talked about. Then you shall bring a new grain offering to Yahuwah. So that is misconstrued as a second count of 50. But it says here, you are to count 7 completed Shabbatot, or weeks. It doesn't say 14. This is very basic. There's a lot more material, a lot more research behind this. We're looking at just a kind of a small look at it right now.
So you're saying that we should read that as a reiteration. First verse says you count 7 complete weeks, which is 49 days. And then the second verse says from the beginning again, you count 50 days. So not only 49 as are the 7 weeks. On the 50th day, you're counting from the beginning again. No, I'm sorry. When I say from the beginning again, I'm saying that it's the same count.
Yes.
It says it twice.
It's reiterating.
Yes.
Reiterating, yes. That's
Verse
what you're
16.
saying. Yeah.
Sorry. Verse 16 is identifying the 49th day, the 7th completed Sabbath. And then after that is when you are to count your 50th day.
Yeah, okay.
Singular. So it's like Kim says, it's reiterating it. Yes.
So yeah, yes, Kim. So we do a special ritual on the 49th day, and then we do another sacrifice, bloodless sacrifices this here on the 50th day.
Yes, you present you can present your offering on the 50th day. Yes.
Yes, okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you.
And yeah, we'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, I understand. And I understand now why people say that. But I mean, I haven't met any or I haven't found anyone on online who says that we need to count another extra 50 days. That I haven't I don't know anybody who interprets these 2 verses like that.
It's out there. We've run into it numerous times.
Okay. All right.
To the point where it was important for us to delineate each day in exact precision, and Charlene has done a marvelous job of doing this in one of the studies. She has from the blood ratification point in Exodus 24:11. From that point, Charlene has laid out day by day up to this point, and it's very accurate. It's very revealing. It's in detail for those that want to see it.
All right. Okay. Does anybody wants to add something or comment on something before I start with my questions?
I just want to say that the 7th completed week always ends with the weekly Shabbat. So day 49 is always a weekly Shabbat. And then day 50 is Shavuot, and that is also a festival that is very special. It's not quite the same as a weekly Shabbat, but it is a Shabbat. So there's 2 in a row, 2 Sabbaths in a row, and that's always really special as well. But like Tim said, the word day is yom, plural is yamin, and in the Hebrew it just says yom. It's just singular, so it should say count day 50, and that makes a whole lot more sense. Our English translators, there's a few things that are just not quite right, and that's why the Hebrew is so important, just to take a look at it and see what it says.
Yeah. And now I think it's the first time that I understand why our in the Eastern Orthodox Church, why the Pentecost festival is always every year on a Monday, because Sunday is the day of the Lord, not Saturday. So Sunday is the day of the Lord. So Pentecost is always on a Monday, as you said, Charlene. It's as if it's 2 Shabbats together. So Sunday, day of the Lord, and then Monday is also a bank holiday. Always Monday. So Sunday and Monday together, always, every year for Pentecost.
Well, we got the pattern right. It's just on different days.
Yeah. So now I understand. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Kim?
No. Not at the moment. Your questions are next.
Yeah.
All
We'll
right,
follow you.
perfect. Okay. So my first question is, what on the first week of creation, the creation week? How do we know, and why are we so certain that an equinox did not happen on the first creation week? And I'll tell you why I ask. Because it sort of makes sense than day 4, when the sun and the rest of the luminaries and the stars were allotted, they were appointed their orbits and, the reason of their existence anyway, on the 4th day. It would make sense that the first official rotation of the sun would be due east to due west. That would make sense to me. Or even on the first day of creation, with the light, when the day and the night were separated, and that would also make sense that could be an equinox. So how are we certain that there was no equinox on the first week? Hence, an equinox always ends the year and never starts it.
When you go through the scriptures and the different examples of Passover being on different days of the week, you will, when you do the count back, you will find, by example, that the equinox is always on the last day of the year, always. And the first day of the year is the day after the equinox. The first day of creation is the first day of the first day of the week, first day of the year, first day of the month, of the new month. It is there. You do not start. Yahuwah did not start with the last day of the year. He started with the first day of the Tekufah circuit of the sun, and that's
So the sun started with an angle. You mean it didn't start one straight from due east to due west? It ended like that, but it didn't start like that.
that's correct.
And that we know because we studied the rest of the scriptures. It's not stated clearly anywhere.
No, it's by example that you have to search out, and you have to lay the events out on charts. Apply everything to charts. Charts don't lie.
Mm-hmm.
Once you lay these events out according to the charts, you will see very, very clearly that the equinox and the shadow is the last day of the year. So Genesis 1:1 was the first day of the year, and it went through 360 days to where there was an equinox, and then the next day was the new year.
Okay. And the 300 and sorry, I'm sorry. Does
Maria,
anyone? Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that the shadow is a sign. It's a sign for Yah's people to look at and to know what's going on. On the first day of creation, there was no people there, neither was there on the 4th day. So that equinox or that shadow sign is for his people. It's for us to know what's happening. And so I don't see any reason why someone has to claim that there has to be an equinox shadow sign on the first day or even the 4th day. So that was marked out for Yah's people so that they would know when the end of the year is, so that they would know the count to find the festival worship statutes. Now, when we say the festival worship statutes, we're talking about the Passover spring and the Shavuot and the fall festivals. The weekly Sabbath just does its 7-day count all the time. So the covenant calendar is to mark out the annual appointed times. It doesn't mark out the weekly Sabbaths, but you can find the weekly Sabbaths with all of the puzzle pieces that you put together. So your question about the equinox, and I know we get this one a lot too. It definitely is the last day of the first year. And that's for Yah's people to know. That's the end of their year. And then they start the first count. It's all about counting.
Yeah. And I saw that when we were counting the days after the first Passover, after Hebrews left Egypt, I noticed that it's as if time started again. So it was year one again, year two, second year, third year. Am I correct?
Not sure.
But that the counting of the years started again?
There
in
is,
Exodus 12. In Exodus 12.
Yeah, from Exodus, yes. After the
Yes.
Exodus, after the Hebrews left Egypt, it's as if the year started over again. Year one, year two again.
there is a cycle of the years where they follow in succession and then they repeat again. There is a succession. I can't remember what that cycle was, where it was on the Exodus account, but the year start does have a pattern that it follows. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't say that the Israelites reached Mount Sinai on the 1500th year from creation. It said, first year, second year. That's what I mean.
It documents the first year in the wilderness.
Yes, exactly.
Documents that.
Yeah, if you were to count out the first year, then the 14th would fall on a Shabbat. Okay, if you go to the first year, the first month, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, that would be on a Shabbat. But the example of Moses leading the people out of Israel doesn't align with that year, like a first year pattern. It might be, I do have a record. I wrote all of the 7 years out and with a 360, but like Tim said, after the 7 year pattern, it goes back the very last day of the 7th year in the 12th month is a Shabbat. And then the first day of the first week of the first month of that following year of the 8th year repeats the pattern.
So every 7 years, there's a pattern.
Every 7 years is a pattern. And within a year, there's a pattern as well. So the first month will repeat itself in the 8th month on a perfect 360.
Yeah, on a 360, not a 364 or 365. The 360 is important.
Right.
Great. And the 360 number also comes out of studying the scriptures. Also, it's not mentioned clearly anywhere.
All prophecy is written in the 30-day months.
But I mean, you need to study it and discern that.
Yes. Yes.
Well, there's a really good example in the Noah and the flood account of Genesis 7 and 8. That's very well documented for the 360 year.
Charlene, could you repeat that, please?
In the flood account in Genesis 7 and 8.
Oh, yes, I did the count for Noah's flood because it's easy. so it's very easy.
And
so I did it.
Yeah. One other thing about that is that in the Zadok, the Dead Sea Scroll calendars, they're all about the same, very close. They add in that extra day at the end of month 3. They do 30 days, 31. And then at the end of month 6, they have 31 days. But in the Noah flood account, it gives you that information from the 2nd month up to the 7th month. So you're crossing over the 3rd month and the 6th month that would normally have those extra days on the Zadok calendar. But in Genesis, it says it's 150 days. It doesn't say 152. Now, we did read on that one chart last time that you have those extra days, but you don't count them. You just live them.
Yes.
But we don't we don't find in the scriptures where Yah says, well, here's a day you don't count it. Every day is
Mhm.
counted.
Yes, yes. Yes.
And prophecy in Revelation and in Daniel. 1,260 days, 1,290 days, 3.5 years. That's prophetic days on a 360-day year. And on a 364-day, you're not going to be in prophetic days. You will never enter into prophetic days. And on a 354 moon day cycle, you will never enter into prophetic days. We will go back to a 360.
Mhm. I don't
Is
know
that
if you
is
know,
that
Maria.
prophesied everywhere, anywhere?
Yes,
It's
Daniel
not
12.
it's not written in explicit terminology exactly like that, but the three timelines in Revelation, the 42 months, 1,260 days, and 3.5 years, are spoken by the voice of Yahuwah. And they are as if they had already happened. His voice is that solid. So if we are living in a year, 365, there's too many days. If we're living in a Zadok style year, 364, there's too many days. If we're living in a lunar year, 354 or all over the board, there's either not enough or there's too many. Yahu has spoken. There will be 3.5 years. There will be 42 months. There will be 1,260 days. That 1,260 doesn't have a plus or minus with it. There will be 1,260 days. To achieve that, we remember the voice of Yahuwah, of Yahusha. He said to his disciples, unless those days are shortened, no man shall live. Why?
Mm.
Why would man not live? Because prophecy cannot be fulfilled unless we're on a 360-day calendar. That is prophecy. It is spoken by the voice of Yahuwah. It is as sure as creation happened in Genesis 1:1. It is that sure. We will be at some point returning back to a 360-day year. That is why Yahuwah said, or recorded in scripture, teach us to number our days, to bring our hearts unto wisdom. We must look for that shadow. It is that shadow on the day of the Teshuvah or the equinox that is going to give us the information whether we are returning back to that 360-day year. Will we understand at the fall equinox? Will he give us an indication? Maybe. He has said he will do nothing, but he will tell his people. So I expect with that promise that those who are determining time by the Tekufa or the Teshuvah shadow, those people will understand when we are
But
going back to 360.
you believe, Tim, that this will happen slowly and gradually?
I have no idea.
Because that must be a pretty strong astronomical, event to happen suddenly.
On the sundial incident with Hezekiah that is recorded 3 times in scripture, note that 3 times, up to that point, there was 30 civilizations that documented a 360-day calendar, not 364, but a 360-day calendar. You see that clearly in the Mul Apin tablets also. But at the sundial incident with Hezekiah, there, after that followed about a 50-year, average 50-year area, space of time where no calendar documentation is available because they did not understand why there is a 365-day year. When the documentation come out from those same civilizations after 700 BC, that's when they saw the documentation, the count for a 365-day year. That's when it began. Now, did we understand that it happened rapidly at that point? That I don't know for absolute certain, but that's what we understand. Will it happen rapidly again? I don't know. We are not told. It could happen gradually. It could happen rapidly. I don't know. That's why Yahuwah said, teach us to number our days. Look for that shadow. It was the shadow that moved back 10 degrees. It was the shadow that determined time. That is the power of the teshuvah, the turning. It is the power of that shadow on the equinox day. That's why it's written here in Genesis 1:14. It is to let them be for signs. That's the sign of Yahuwah's people. It is the sign of the Shana year. Go ahead, Charlene.
I just wanted to mention, maybe Kim, you could look up Isaiah 46, 9 and 10. In Isaiah, between chapters 40 to 48, 7 times Isaiah says you can know the ending from the beginning. That's calendar language too. Yes, we had destructions in the beginning. We haven't done that yet, but there will be destruction at the end. So when you look at how the year was 360 days per year, now that was the festal calendar and the civil calendar, okay? Right now we're dealing with a festival calendar inside of a civil, or, tucked inside of a civil calendar of 365. So when we understand that the pattern has to come back to the way it was in the beginning, then you know that those timelines that are given in Daniel 12 and in Revelation, they only work on a civil year of 360 days. So Kim, would you read that verse? And then if we need to, we can supply the other verses to her later on. But I wanted to comment about Hezekiah.
Yes, Isaiah 46, 9 and 10. Remember the former events of old, for I am El, and there is no one else, Elohim, and there is no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from of old that which has not yet been done, saying, my counsel does stand, and all my delight I do.
Now, there's what I like to call a hermeneutic principle that is really important to remember, and it's just a really short sentence. Just listen to it. Yahuwah does not repeat anything of no great consequence. That means that when something is repeated, there is a reason for it, and we need to have ears up. So that, what we just heard from Kim, Isaiah repeats that principle 7 times. So that's important to listen to. Now, I have seen and I have heard people say that the Hezekiah's sundial event, well, it's not really that important. It just added 15 years to his life. Yeah, that was part of the story. But that sundial moved back 10 degrees or 10 steps on Ahaz's sundial. And I don't think it took a couple years. It happened, okay? Now, I just want to point out, first of all, that out of all, if you read through the Old Testament, you'll find lots of stories that are repeated twice. The sundial incident is repeated 3 times in the Old Testament. 3 times, not 2. And I know when I read my Bible through the very first time, way back in 2000, I noticed that. I didn't know anything about calendar. I thought, how come that sundial event is repeated 3 times? There's lots that are done 2, but that one's 3. I didn't know what it was, but I do now. But I want to read Genesis 41. And if you want to turn there, it's going to be, I'm just going to pick out verse 32. This is about Joseph when he was asked to interpret the Pharaoh's dream about the 7 fat cows and the 7 skinny cows. Do you remember that? And the grain, the grain was plump and full, and then the 7 skinny sheaves of grain. In verse 32, here's where this hermeneutic principle comes in. This is what Joseph was saying to the Pharaoh. And the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice, because the thing is established by Yahuwah, and Yahuwah will shortly bring it to pass. Twice. It was repeated twice to the Pharaoh to tell him that this is really important. Pay attention to what your dream meant. Well, you come up to King Hezekiah, and it's written down in Kings and Chronicles and Isaiah. So that is something important. That sundial event is a very important event for calendar, and approximately 700 BC. I don't know if that helps a little bit.
Yeah. So we're saying that during that incident, the year became 365 days instead of 360. These 10 degrees, the shadow moved, signified 5 extra days in the year somehow.
Well, I like to explain it. Yeah, that the circuit was still a 360 degree circuit in the Mazzaroth, in through the constellations, but it was like a rubber band. It got stretched a little bit. So the circuit, that's the only way that I can understand it simply, is that circuit was still there, but it was just a little longer. It was just stretched out. And so however Yahuwah is going to bring it back, he might bring it back all at once. We don't know, but I kind of think he might. I kind of think he might just bring it back all at once. But that's why we're starting now to take a close look at the count between the beginning of the year and the September equinox, counting those days out, because we feel that you're going to see if there's going to be a shift. There could be a little bit of a shift right there. And then the next year you would know. So it's all about counting. And Yahuwah has a people that are going to know how to count. It's all about counting.
Yeah. Kim?
And also, as I'm processing this commissioning of the signs happened on day 4, the greater light and the lesser light, their commissioning was given on day 4, which is to be for a sign. So do we believe that it was then on that 4th day that their commissioning was given to be the equinox sign? Not on that day, but just their commissioning, their job description was given on day 4. Now, I know many calendars want to say, well, that's when that day 4 is day 1, but where's the logic in that? Yahuwah said day 1 is day 1, and the sun did begin its circuit, evidenced in the fact that there was an evening and a morning, and you cannot have an evening and a morning without the actual sun. There is spiritual understanding there, but first the physical, then the spiritual. So
I've read, Kim, about that. I've read possibly in one of the comments. So maybe you've read that also. That before day 4, there was light. And then after day 4, the sun was appointed to drive that light. So the light is not from the sun. The light exists independently because God, our Father created it on day 1. And then the sun was commissioned to drive that light. I don't know how that works. I just read it and I don't know whether you read it also.
So my question would be then why does it say in Genesis 1, verse 5, and there came to be evening and there came to be morning one day? What was the evening? What was the morning?
Well, apparently, according to that person, the light was traveling on its own without the sun. I don't know.
So
okay.
We will go into Genesis 1 another time, and we'll go into great detail.
Okay. All right. Charlene, about the priestly duties, I I took the time to count the days and, the weeks, as you said, the 28, how you call them, courses. Correct me if I'm wrong. So 2 times 24 courses. 24.
Yes.
So 2 times 24, it's 48. So 48 courses times 7 is 336 days. 336 days. And then we have the extra 3 weeks that all the priests go to the temple. That's another 21 days. And then we're left with 3 days to reach 360. What's going on these 3 days?
Those 3 days just spill over into the next year, as far as I understand it. They would just start that priestly course. However it works, I don't know. I haven't done a deep study in that. But basically, with the 364-day calendar, I don't think it really allows for all the priests to come 3 times a year. It doesn't work out. On a 364, it doesn't work out either. So
No, it doesn't work either. I'm just saying that there's no perfect counting on 360 days either. We still have 3 days that are left out.
the priests came in to their course on a Shabbat. That's when they came in and they started their duties on a Shabbat. It was always changed over on a Shabbat. And like, how can you explain? The weekly Shabbat just keeps counting 7. That is independent of the months and the week, the days of the year. The weekly Shabbat is independent, so it just keeps counting. So when they're done with their course number 24 for the second time around, they start over again.
Yeah, I would say so, but then then if we say that the priests worked on a weekly basis with counting Shabbats, as then it's not a very strong argument for any calendar.
That's right.
360 or 364, if they're just following,
right.
the weekly
Yeah.
duties. Okay, all right.
Yeah, we don't see that argument being used.
Yes,
for
and you
covenant.
told me that it's not a strong argument. You just mentioned it. Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
It is a bit confusing how the weeks work independently of the years. I mean, why would our creator do it like that? Different counting for the weeks and different counting for the years. It would be nice. It
think
would be easier if it was coinciding these 2 cycles.
Yeah,
We'll get to
yeah,
ask.
we'll have to ask. We'll have to ask him.
Yes. Okay.
But there is some logic to it and some reasoning to it as far as he's concerned, I think, is because and we just taught this yesterday, is that Yahuwah allows for everyone to have their hook of doubt. It's built in there. If you want to believe something that is not according to his word, it's built in there that you can find it, and the enemy is going to make sure you find it. It's a test. It's a test. That's what it is. He just says, I want you to count your Shabbats every 7 days, no matter what. Every 7 days is Shabbat. And then the test is, now I want you to find my Shabbats, find the Shabbat in the Exodus 12 account. When was the Shabbat after they left Passover? Find it. When was the Shabbat when Yahushua was crucified? Where was it? Because there's some calendars that say that the Shabbat was the 15th. It was the day after Passover. When was the Shabbat when Joshua went into Canaan, when he crossed over and went into where was the Shabbat? And it's a test. And lots of people like to, the lunar Sabbath calendars, they like to say, well, the Shabbat's always the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th. That's why we showed that Numbers 10 on the cloud. So he puts tests all over the place to test his people to see if they're really going to follow him. And
It is a test. It has multiple answers because he wants us to know our material. When you have multiple answers for a question, you have to know exactly what you understand in order to answer correctly. And we're not. He says if we're going to do things, we're to do it with all our heart. Study to prove yourself worthy. We need to know our material.
Yes, that manna week is a perfect example. The manna week in the wilderness. Each day they were to gather the bread. That's a picture of the word. 6 days you're gathering the word. That's our grounding point. And the 6th day you get a double portion. And then you'll understand where Shabbat is in it. They didn't he didn't tell them to look at phases of the moon to determine that manna week. It was gathering the bread. And Yahusha said, I am the bread of life. I am the way. We gather it every day. And on the 6th day, a double portion, and we'll understand the placement of his Shabbat.
And note when they gathered it, it was in the morning. That's when the spiritual bread comes to us. That's when Yahuwah speaks to us in the morning. At dawn is the best time. Remember when the heat of the day came, the manna disappeared. It went away. Our spiritual bread comes in the morning. When we wake up at dawn and we dig into the word in the morning, that's the best time. That's when Yahuwah speaks to us.
I need to start waking up earlier, clearly. Okay. My son is tuned in. He doesn't read very well yet, but he's tuning to the dawn. He wakes up. All right. I have a couple of questions that are not for the calendar per se, but you did mention, Tim, some things in our previous presentation. And I'm writing here, can we talk about the requirement of blood for a covenant? Because both you, Tim, and Charlene, you're saying that the covenant calendar is blood ratified. And I do not understand that. I don't understand what you mean by that the covenant calendar is blood ratified. Can we define that? What do we mean when we say blood ratified?
Okay, at some point, what I would like to see is Charlene go over the journey of Moshe up and down the mount, up and down, the receiving of the word. The 10 Commandments is what we commonly understand, but that is the full covenant. And once that was received, there was a blood application. Blood was sprinkled onto the people. A blood sprinkling, that is the ratification. Why blood? Because the ancient suzerain treaty, which we understand that's the style of covenant that Yahuwah made with Abraham, was the ancient suzerain treaty where the sacrifices were split in half. The blood was shed. In other words, if that covenant was broken, that blood signified that there had to be death. That is the ultimate consequence for breaking that covenant. Death would be incurred if that covenant was broken. That is the signification of the blood. And at Mount Sinai, the sprinkling of the blood occurred. Moshe sprinkled the people with blood before it was signed and sealed with the meal on the mount. That blood signifies, if we break that covenant, our blood will be shed. When we shed blood, when we lose our blood, that's death. That's the signification of the importance of blood ratification. And that is why this let me give my thoughts here. When the proposal was given to the Hebrew nation 3 times before his blood ratified on the Mount, that proposal was agreed to 3 times by the Hebrew nation. They agreed. They were brought out of Mitzrayim on a very specific timetable, very specific. And one of the biggest illustrations was the man a week, the 7th-day Sabbath. You work 6 days. And after you have worked 6 days, the 7th-day Sabbath becomes a completed Sabbath in that it gives a rest to the previous 6 days. That is part of the agreement that was blood ratified. Israel, do you understand this? Yes, we understand and we accept. That is the acceptance. Okay, let's make the covenant. This is how important it is, Israel. We will cut the sacrifices, signifying your blood will pay the requirement for the breaking of this covenant. Your life, your death is on the line. That's what the blood ratification signifies. Go ahead, Charlene. You're muted.
Charlene, you're muted.
That helps, doesn't it? I just wanted to say that there's different kinds of covenants.
Yeah.
There are covenants that are everlasting, and there's covenants that are temporary, that they only last for a short amount of time. So the blood ratification is the mark that it is a permanent, everlasting covenant. So just in short, the covenant that was made, there's lots of covenants, but we're just going to talk about the one at Mount Sinai right now, where it was repeated. It is not a new covenant, but Yahuwah, he proposed a covenant to the people. And when Moses was there, all it was is, will the people come into covenant with me? Will they let me be their Elohim? And I'll take care of them, and I'll make them kings and priests. Will you come into covenant? Just an agreement, a partnership, a relationship. They didn't know what the words of the covenant were at this point in time, but they said yes, they would do that. So the first thing is there is a proposal. And the second thing, there has to be an acceptance. There has to be at least 2 parties. So the proposal was, will you be in covenant with me? And the people accepted and said, yes, we will. The third component of an everlasting covenant is the blood ratification. There has to be blood, and that's what Tim was talking about. And the blood signifies that whoever breaks the covenant pays the penalty for breaking it. It was pretty serious. And the fourth component of an everlasting covenant is the covenant confirming meal, which happened in Exodus 24 after Moses received all the words of the covenant and wrote them in a book. Then there was 75 out of that congregation that got together and had a covenant confirming meal that said, there will be no adding and no taking away from this covenant. Those are the components of an everlasting covenant. When we look at Exodus 12, and we can do this in another study, there is blood ratification on the calendar, because in Exodus 12, Yahuwah said, this is the beginning of your year. This is where you start your year. This is where you count. Now I want you to count. And there was a lamb slain, and they did eat a meal. Okay. So Yahuwah was proposing, he said, this is what you're going to do. They accepted. They did it. They did slay the lamb. They did eat the lamb. They confirmed. There's your blood ratification of your covenant calendar there in Exodus 12. But the everlasting covenant was given to Adam, and all the way up to Mount Sinai. That was where it was repeated to the people. There was a lot of people, a great multitude that came out of Egypt that didn't understand this Elohim of the Israelites. They didn't know who he was. They had seen what happened during the plagues. Many of them came out. They thought it was a little safer to go out than to stay in Egypt. But they had to learn who this Elohim is, and they had to learn his instructions. And that's what we're talking about in the covenant, is his instructions on how to live in harmony with each other and how a nation can work together, but also how to have a relationship with him, how to be in relationship with him so that he can bless his people to be kings and priests. That's what he promised there in Exodus 19, and you'll find it all over the scriptures. He said, I want you to be kings and priests under me. I want you to be my people. That was an everlasting covenant. Basically, they broke the covenant at the golden calf, and lovingly Elohim made an exception. He said, I'm not going to put you under the death penalty. I will have my son give the penalty of death in your place. That's the amazing part, because they knew they were under a death penalty. They broke it. They knew they did. As you read further into Exodus 25 and you go through up to Exodus 31, you have the beginnings of a temporary covenant. And this was another set of laws that they were given that didn't have a proposal from Yahuwah. He didn't say, I'm going to, yes, he just said, I'm going to say, you have to keep these. They didn't accept. They didn't have to. He said, doesn't matter whether you accept or not. You're just going to have to accept. This is the way it is. There was no blood ratification. There was no meal. You could add to these laws. You could take away from them, but they were only temporary up to the point that Yahushua dies and leaves his life. Then those laws were done away with. So that's the difference. That's why we're saying that this calendar is a covenant calendar that is blood ratified because of those points. That's why it is the everlasting calendar. Now, having said that, then the test comes for all the other calendars. Can they find that their calendar is blood ratified in those pages between Genesis 1 to Exodus 24:11? Now, yes, Torah is important, but we're saying that those are covenant Torah pages. Those are everlasting covenant Torah pages. In those pages, that is where it was an everlasting covenant. There was always blessings. In the covenants that have no everlasting component, there was curses. There was lots of curses. So covenant calendar comes with blessings. It comes with restoration, not only between us and our Creator, but restoration between us and our family and our friends and all those around us. Have not been able to find. Have not been able to find where any lunar calendar or any Dead Sea calendars can come under those restrictions. It just doesn't fit.
Mm-hmm. I understand. I didn't understand your last sentence about the curses, but because it's irrelevant to the calendar, I'm proposing maybe you don't explain that to me now. Maybe we can have a separate session, or we can talk, ourselves, because I would like to understand what you mean.
Yeah, and another thing, just so that everybody understands, it's amazing that when you start looking at the covenant calendar, it breaks open all these other topics. Have never seen another calendar do that. It is absolutely amazing, just like what we're talking about today, the blessings and the cursings. The covenant calendar study, it just has the ability to go into every crook and cranny of the scriptures. And it's like, it's just the way Yahuwah designed it. He calls it a covenant of the day and a covenant of the night. This calendar is a covenant. And it's he set this all, he had this all set out from the foundation of the world, from the beginning of the foundation of the world. Calendar is so important because it shows his people how to stay in relationship with him. And to me, yes, all the instructions are important, but the worship statutes where he says, I want to meet with you on this day, not a day early, not a day late. Yes, he's with us all the time, but he has sanctified and made holy or Kodesh certain days where he has set them aside. And he said, these are just for you and for me. If others want to come in and join, great. But this is the day, not the day before, the day after, not 2 weeks later, not 5 weeks later. these days are the worship statutes, where those are the days that have the blessing. And so I think that's a hard piece for a lot of people to understand, because Maria, since about 2017, there has been an absolute explosion of festal calendars. There is such a huge amount of different kinds of counting festival calendars out there that people go, I don't even know which is right anymore. They don't know how to understand it. They don't know how to study it. They don't even know where to start. And they're asking questions of their leaders. We have experience with this, and their leaders don't know how to answer the questions. And you know what the leaders are saying now? Nobody knows how to find the true calendar. These are people that we've known in our acquaintance for many, many years. Nobody really knows. We won't know the true calendar until it's all over and we get to heaven. We don't agree with that. We believe that when Yahuwah commands us and asks us to come on his worship statutes, that he has to be able to reveal the calendar so that you can find those worship statutes and you can know that you're on the right day. We don't believe that keeping any day as holy just because it's convenient is good enough. And that's hard for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. So that's why you say that Enoch's calendar is not blood ratified, because there was no blood and no meal after his understanding of the calendar.
Yes.
Well,
Most
that,
importantly, the requirements of the Enoch calendar cannot be found in Torah. They cannot.
mostly the
Oh, that
364
upsets people so much.
it's the 364 is just not in the Torah. It is not there. I don't know how they find it in Torah. Now, I just read a little article from a calendar. It's a Zadok calendar. Tim and I read it here just the other day. And the title page, interesting, the title page on this 2023 Zadok calendar says this: Torah is light. And I read this 5 or 6 introductory pages before they started their calendar, and I didn't really find too many Torah verses. Did you, Tim?
No.
There wasn't any Torah verses for this Zadok calendar, yet the calendar is called, the title is Torah is Light. And I'm thinking, Torah is one of those buzzwords, and covenant is a buzzword. People like those words. They ring of truth to them. But Zadok and Enoch, I have not seen them show from Torah where you can find a 364-day year. And then, of course, Passover, we just went through only 2 examples of Passover. We have 4 more to do, but only 2 examples already show that Passover doesn't have to be on a Tuesday every single year. So how do they prove this from Torah? I don't know. That's a question to ask them.
Yeah. Tim, also on the previous presentation, you mentioned something which I didn't understand. You said, and maybe I'm paraphrasing here, but you said Yahusha was slain by the foundations of the earth, and that required blood or something like that. Do you remember it?
Yes.
What do you mean?
Give me 1 second. I want to bring something up. Can you see the screen?
Yes. Yes.
The first word, Bereshit. At the end of Bereshit is a tav. You see, I don't know if you can see my pointer.
I do. Yes.
That tav is a covenant. It's a sign, a seal, and a signature of a covenant. At the very beginning, the very first word, bara, that is the creation, and the word sheet, bereshit, the sheet is a garment. It's a garment of righteousness. And it is signed, sealed, and a signature of a covenant. That covenant, at the very beginning, in the first word, that covenant is a sign and a seal of righteousness. Then we come to the second word, bara. This is a repeat. This is a second repetition of the word bara. There, it indicates another covenant, a repetition. Something has happened to the first garment of righteousness, and it would need to be reestablished. Okay, that covenant would need to be reestablished. And we see Elohim, and then we see the Aleph Tav. We just talked about this end from the beginning. This is the Aleph Tav, the end and the beginning. So through these letters, we can understand that at the very first word, the beginning of creation, the ending of this earth was also written right here. Aleph Tav, the end from the beginning. In this covenant, under the Tav, right here, in this covenant, because the garment, the sheet, the garment of righteousness was broken by Adam first, and then at Mount Sinai, the establishment of another, the creating of another, the establishment of another covenant when Yahusha died, and he reestablished the covenant under the Melchizedek order. Yahusha died, he shed his blood. So under these words here, we understand that Yahusha had to die. He had to reestablish the Melchizedek order at some point. It's all under this covenant right here. That Yahusha had to die is understood within the first few words of Genesis 1:1. Blood had to be shed by Yahusha HaMashiach in the understanding of the first few words of Genesis 1:1. I'm not sure if you understand what I tried to explain.
I understood perfectly. I'm just wowed. Oh, I've never heard that before.
And people tell us that I don't need Hebrew. I have my Bibles here and I don't need Hebrew. Sorry, but I speak English. That's my native tongue. I began to learn a little bit of Spanish, and that Spanish helped me with my Hebrew. And in that learning process, I understand that you cannot translate from one language to another and carry the accuracy. There is always an impairment of some kind. So, and we in North America do not understand that as much as you people live in your area, because you speak multiple languages with which we are deficient in North America on that as a whole. So you have a better understanding of that impairment going
Yes,
from language to language.
yes, and also that some things cannot be translated.
Yes,
Absolutely cannot. There are words you cannot translate. There are no words to translate some of
Yeah.
the words that you speak in your native language.
yes.
Mm.
That's why we go back to the Hebrew. That's why I study very carefully the Hebrew. Am I proficient at it? No. No. But I do the best that I can. I have 7 lexicons that I study from and an etymological dictionaries of the Hebrew language, and we compare them all. Every definition must match throughout the study. If they do not match, we cannot use them. Okay, so that's the depth that we go to speak what we say.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Charlene.
So I don't know if you understood, but Tim was talking about the Melchizedek priesthood, and this is again where calendar kind of reaches into another topic. Now, the Zadok calendars, they have a very strong point, and they say that their calendar has the authority over all other calendars because of the Zadok priesthood. And the Zadok priesthood was there under David, under King David. But that is not of the Melchizedek priesthood. That is from the line of Levi, the Aaronic priesthood. And there's a lot of people that don't understand that. So now I said there's some buzzwords. Torah is a buzzword, covenant is a buzzword, and so is priesthood. People like those words because it sounds like it gives credit and authority to a calendar, that it has to be the true calendar. And we just heard this recently. Well, Zadok has to be the right one because it has the Zadok priesthood, which Enoch doesn't have, and the Essene calendar doesn't claim it. And then we heard next that the Zadok priesthood is of Melchizedek, and that is absolutely not true. But these people that are claiming this don't know how to figure it out. They just say it. They just give this information, and people hear it and it sounds good, and they just accept it. They don't know how to study it out, and it is a big study. There are big studies, but they are simple if you're just shown. I'll tell you what, it's just as simple as reading Exodus 19 to about Exodus 32 and actually reading what the words say. And I know for myself and for many others, we've been sloppy readers. We've been reading these words and we haven't been really understanding what they're saying. But you know what? It's just a story. It's just a story, but that's the foundation right there to show you how important that priesthood is. It actually starts in Genesis right there at the beginning. But we're not seeing these patterns. And, when, people have spent 20 years to break open this cornerstone piece of the scriptures that just blows everything open. And covenant calendar is one of those building blocks that helps to pull it all together. So I just wanted to mention that the Zadok priesthood is a very strong card. When people hear that, they like that, and they will gravitate to a Zadok calendar, believing that it is true because of those words priesthood. But no, the Zadok priesthood is not teaching the proper understanding of all of the priesthoods, Melchizedek, as well as the Zadok.
You're saying that you do agree that the Zadok priesthood did follow a 364 days a year.
No, it couldn't have, because at the time of King David, that is approximately 1000 BC, and the world was still on a 360-day calendar at that point in time. There's still
Then why do
300
they
years.
say? Where is the proof?
What's that?
How can they claim then that the Zadok priesthood followed the 364 days a year cycle? How do they say that?
They must get that out of the Dead Sea Scrolls, out of these other books, Enoch and Jubilees and Jasher. I haven't read all of those books. I've only read calendar pieces. But they, and like I stated, I think last week or maybe the week before, is that yes, there could be some truth in those books, but they're not in the Holy Scriptures. They're not in there for a reason. And when it comes to calendar, there's a lot of conflicts. So the question is, where did they get that information from Torah? That's what I would like to know, because right now the information is coming from these Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran.
Yeah, that's not a good argument for them, because I know the argument. The argument is that scriptures, the canon was decided by people who most probably were corrupted. They decided which books are staying in. They decided which books are going out. Some churches have some in, some out. You understand? So that's not a good argument. that I can,
But-
it's not
but
an
you know what?
argument.
They say that that decision was made by people, but was it? Actually, Yahuwah had the last word on that. He inspired people. He has the last word. If Yahuwah wanted those books of Enoch and Jubilees or whatever they are in the Holy Canon, they would have been in there. He has the
Yes,
last
but Shirley,
word. Yeah,
some churches have some books in that you don't. For example,
Yes.
my church have some
yes,
apocrypha in
yes.
since the beginning of, since the inception of the Greek Orthodox, the Orthodox Church. They're in. They're in our canon. They're considered scriptures, scripture. And in America, they're not considered scripture. So we have some conflicts between churches.
But that's changing now, because in America there are Bibles that are people that are believing in Enoch Zadok calendars. They are putting those books in their publishing Bibles with it. So it is happening over here as well. But the thing is, when you start looking at calendar, there's conflict. So when I see your hand, Kim. So when there's conflict, then we all have to be able to make a decision which way we're going to go. So I'll leave my comments there for now. And
Yeah, but we can't. I'm not comfortable accepting as scripture books that have any information wrong.
yeah,
Right.
I'm not good with the idea that Enoch, for example, Enoch is not in our canon. I was not referring to Enoch. Tobit, and other books are in our canon, not Enoch. In Ethiopia, Enoch is in their canon. But anyway, I'm having a hard time accepting that Enoch is scripture if the calendar is wrong, but everything else is correct. Even that, I'm not satisfied with that answer. If it's scripture, it has to be correct 100% in every, even the comma needs to be correct. Yeah, I'm sorry, Kim.
No.
What?
It brings to mind the book of life. The book of life. And that is the book that holds the truth. And what is the book of life? I don't think we're discrediting that there were scriptural documents found in those caves. That's not the problem. The problem is the books that have calendar written in them that don't match his book, the book of life. And I just wanted to also comment on this. I kind of had done a little bit of investigation on the lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And I began to look that up. And it's tied to a phrase in Revelation 17:8. And it says, and the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come up out of the pit of the deep and go to destruction. And those dwelling on the earth whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world shall marvel when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. So the statement here is whose names, those who are dwelling on the earth whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. Seems to be that the names are in the book from the foundation of the world. If you go to Revelation 13:8, we see that same phrase. And all those dwelling on the earth whose names have not been written in the book of life, whose book is it? Of the slain lamb from the foundation of the world shall worship him. What is from the foundation of the world? The book of the names in the book of life. And whose book is it? So there's a book of life. Whose book is it? It's the Lamb's book of life. It's his book, and it has names written in it. And they were written in it from the foundation of the world. Is your name in the book? Is my name in the book? Because we know that Moses talked about having names be, Yah said, I'll blot your name, I'll blot their names out of the book. So there's covenant too, right there in the names that are in the book from the foundation. And it is the slain lamb's book. It's his book. He was foreordained to be the sacrifice from that foundation of the world. And Messiah appeared once at the end of the ages as the sacrifice for sin. Over and over, we can find out there's a book of light and it has names in it. And it's from the the punctuation, look at the punctuation. It's from the foundation. The names were written in the foundation because we were a thought. We were a thought. We were a living thought. Thoughts are living, and he spoke it.
Are you implying, Kim, that our fate is predestined?
No.
Don't. Let's not go there, Kim. We will never finish, and we deviate a lot from calendar
Something to
discussion.
think
But make a note, and let's have a discussion about that because it's another big topic.
But
Yeah.
I would like to make a note that is calendar,
Yes.
going back to any calendar. And this is the test for us. It has to be found, all those foundations, all those components of the calendar, which we talked about the very first time, which is how does the day start and how long is the day? Do you remember that?
Yes.
When does the month begin and how long is the month? And how does the year begin and how long is the year? Those 6 components, you can find those in every single calendar in the earth. They just are there. With covenant calendar, all those components are found within the covenant Torah pages, Genesis 1 to Exodus 24:11. Those components are found in those covenant Torah pages. And that's where you see the blood ratification. Okay. The other calendars have to be able to do that. That's their challenge. And we'll give them all of Torah, okay, not just those pages. But then there's another component, because we know that our Creator is the one that gave his calendar in the Torah. He has to live it out in the Gospels. He has to live out his calendar in the Gospels. So that's what covenant calendar is doing. What we have found in the Torah, it has to be found exactly that way in Yahushua's ministry in the Gospels, not in the calendar of the Jews that were trying to get rid of him because they were on a lunar calendar. There was lots of different lunar calendars, okay, during this time frame. These are all huge studies. So the test is for every calendar out there, find all your 6 components within covenant Torah pages, and then find it in Yahushua's ministries in the Gospels. And that's where it falls down. Because everything, you can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? Can you actually walk out that calendar in Yahushua's sandals in the Gospels? That's where I have not seen anybody take up that challenge and meet it. And covenant calendar does it beautifully. And we're finding that the more that we search the Gospels, and by the way, the Gospels, just to sit down and read them, it's a piece of cake. It's just a wonderful story of the gospel, the plan of salvation. That's what you see over and over. But if you want to understand calendar, you have to know how to get into those Gospels and really search, because that's this tricky part. But we're starting to understand how to do that. And it is fun. And now we're seeing how the Torah and the Gospels are working together very closely. And I do not see any covenant calendar able to even step up to the plate for that. I know Tim's got something to say.
Charlene and Tim and Kim, will we have a separate presentation about Passover with Yahushua? Is that a different presentation?
That's up to you, Maria. It's a
Yes, because yes, please, because I do have some questions. But if we have a different presentation, then I will reserve them. You may answer them, on your presentation, and I won't have to.
How many presentations would you like on the Passion Week?
How many presentations are you willing to give to me?
We will give you as much as you will accept.
I am accepting all of them.
I want to mention right now, you heard Charlene mention about Yahusha's sandals. And you will hear us reference his sandals probably fairly often, because we have realized through many people's questions, they say, well, how come Yahusha didn't say this to his disciples? How come he didn't teach this? His sandals did. Where he walked, what he did. John 7 verse 6 says, I bear witness against it. How did he bear witness? His sandals walked out the Torah, walked out the covenant. His sandals speak just about louder than his voice. His sandals are an incredible witness. What he did, how he did it, when he did it is absolutely astounding. And yes, we have many studies on the Passion Week on what he did. They're waiting for you.
Cool. Then I'll skip this question here.
Okay, so just let me let you know what we had in mind, because you wanted to know about Passover replacement. That was your first question. Like, why is Passover not always on a Tuesday? Okay, so we've done the first two. The next one is going to be Joshua, and it is one of the most powerful studies we have ever come across, is Joshua when he crosses over into the land. And you will see very clearly this was not on a Tuesday. Then there's 3 more examples. So these are all huge, huge studies. The fourth example is Yahusha at age 12. When was Passover that year? 4 covenant calendar, okay? And then there's Yahusha's crucifixion, his Passover. That has to connect with Daniel 9:27 in the midst of the week. And then there's Paul and his witness almost 30 years after the cross, a witness for covenant calendar. And where was Passover that year? They're huge studies, hours and hours. But those are 6 places in the scriptures that we have found to date where you can actually say Passover was on that cycle of the week or that cycle of the week. There could be more, but those 6 we have for sure. Do other calendars have them? I don't know. Haven't seen. So
Great.
we were sort of planning next time to do
Great.
the Joshua study.
Do. Yeah, great. Okay. Somewhere in scriptures it mentions that the day, the sun stopped moving for a day until a battle was over. Did that affect calendar? The days, the year, the years?
And it did not affect the length of the day. It did not affect the calendar.
How come? If the sun stops, how does that not interfere with the 24-hour?
Because that year was also judged as a Shana year. Genesis 1:14, the word Shana is the word for year. Shana is a duplication in mirror-like form. If the sun had have lengthened the year by 1 day, that would not be a Shana year. It would have been a different reflection than the year before. And then the year after would have been Shana, which would have been different from that lengthened day or lengthened year by the 1 day. So for the year before and after to also be Shana, a duplication, that year where the day was, where the sun stopped, had to be the exact same length as the years before and after. It is the sun that stopped, not time in that instance. Go ahead, Charlene.
So, Charlene, just a minute. So, can we say that, for example, the sun stopped at noon on Monday, and then it continued its course on at noon on a Tuesday, so that did not affect at all the length of the day, and time kept going. So it was Monday, it was Tuesday. The sun for that 24-hour period was not moving. Like that, I can understand that that does not affect at all either the length of a day or the length of a year.
What I understand is it did not affect the 24-hour period that is deemed one of the cycles of 7 within the week.
Yes, because if we say, for another example, that the sun stops at noon and then resumes at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, then there isn't that affects the length of the day.
Yeah.
But if it resumes at the same time on a different day, then that's not affecting the 24-hour day. The days roll over Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and the sun continues its course exactly when it's supposed, at the hour that it's supposed to continue its course. If you understand what I mean.
Yes, I understand. Or Yahuwah could have moved that sun rapidly to the position it was supposed to have been in.
Yes, it ran. It speeded, let's say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's another way of looking at that. So we remember that when Yahuwah brought the children out of Israel, he brought them out on eagle's wings. There is a rapid movement there on eagle's wings. And that is the possibility with the sun also on that extra long period where the sun stood still. That Yahuwah has the ability to move that sun rapidly on eagle's wings, if you will, to the position it originally was supposed to be in.
Yeah, okay, sure, of course.
Just another way of thinking about it. I
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
there. I don't.
Yeah, you weren't there, right? Okay.
I know I got gray hairs, but not that many.
But the thing is,
yes.
it works both ways. At the crucifixion, it was pitch dark. And so it was a divine miracle. But we do need to remember, I think it's Jeremiah 33 in verses 20 to 26, where Yahuwah said, it is a covenant of the day and a covenant of the night. The covenant that he made is that these cycles they're going to be this much. And I'm not going to lengthen a cycle from 24 hours to 36 hours, or maybe back to 18 hours. It's a covenant. And so if he chooses to do a miracle and have the sun shine for 23 out of 24 hours on that particular day, that's up to him. It doesn't lengthen the day as far as I understand. Go ahead, Tim.
I'll read that verse for you. I had it right open to that page. Jeremiah 33, verse 20. Thus saith Yahuwah, if you could break my covenant with the day and my covenant with the night, so that there be not day and night in their season, then my covenant could also be broken with David, my servant, so that he shall not have a son to reign upon his throne. Who is that son? And with the Levites, the Kohanim, my attendants. So there is a covenant of the day and there is a covenant of the night. And this will bring us right back to Genesis 1:1. Going through Genesis 1:5, that covenant of the day and the covenant of the night. The covenant of the day, which is the light season, which leads the night season. And yet, so many religions have declared that the night begins the day, instead of the way it's written in Genesis 1:1, where the dawn light of the morning begins the 24-hour period, dawn to dawn, all through Scripture. This is the covenant of the day and the covenant of the night. It says here, in their season. The night season follows the light, not the other way around. And this brings us back to observing the Sabbath. So many religions observe the Sabbath starting at sunset, which is in direct opposition to Genesis 1 right through Scripture.
Also, I've heard many people arguing that Passover cannot be on a Sabbath, because on a Sabbath we're not supposed to do anything. We're supposed to rest, and Passover needs a lot of preparation, a lot of work. And okay, my answer would be working for your father is not a job. You can do it on Sabbath. Do you have any other explanation? Any other answer?
Yes.
Yeah.
You are
Joshua.
going to absolutely love our next presentation with Joshua. It will
Okay.
in you.
Okay.
The Passover with Joshua entering into Canaan was on the seventh-day Sabbath. Passover on a seventh-day Sabbath. And it is as sure as the statutes written in the scripture. Detailed. We have 10 studies on this. We will only do one though.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay.
And
All
we
right.
might have Kim teach. Kim just did it. She just did it yesterday with Dubai, and so yeah, I think
Will
we'll
you
have
be
Kim.
presenting, Kim?
I can.
Yeah, it is really a
Great.
good study. Yeah.
She
Great.
she does a smashing job of it too.
I'm sure she is. Okay. Another question that I didn't understand. Another thing that I didn't understand. When we started counting the days for Moses in Egypt, we're saying we're picking a day of the week that we say that equinox happened. And this is how we start our our counting. And my question is, how do we know that equinox was on that when when Yahuwah said this is the beginning of your year? How do we know which day of the week it was?
That study starts at Mount Sinai. When Moshe received the 10 Commandments, that was on the 10 Commandments, the 10 Devarim, the covenant. That was on the 50th day count, or Shavuot. That was the 50-day count of the Omer. When Moshe received that covenant, you count backwards.
Backwards.
And
Okay.
you determine all the details of the Exodus, starting from when Moshe demanded to Pharaoh, we must go 3 days into the wilderness. Pharaoh says, no, Moshe, we must go 3 days into the wilderness. We have to start there. If we this took us 2 years to get this study right. It never worked out. There was always something wrong, and we had to throw it out and start over again. That to determine that new year, every word, every appointment, every statute in the Exodus account must be fulfilled according to Hebrew definition, placed on a chart. There must be absolute perfect linear alignment in a progressive manner. From when he told Pharaoh on the riverbank, we must go 3 days into the wilderness, to when the blood ratification occurred at Mount Sinai. Everything has to be completed, fulfilled perfectly. When you have that established, that's when you know when the day of the Teshuvah shadow sign was. And until all that's accomplished, you do not know when that day is.
Are you saying that you went back? So you started even further back from the new year, counting the days even further back from when Moses was telling Pharaoh, "We have to leave. You have to let us go." You're counting that year also. You have charted that year also.
Absolutely. And you must know exactly what day was the 14th day of the month, the Passover day. You have to know exactly what day of the week that was. You have to know exactly what day of the week that they left Egypt. These appointments are important. You have to know that they had 3 appointments to camp when they left. It's recorded in the scripture. And it's recorded that they set up camp at the Red Sea before they were going to cross the Red Sea. They set up camp. They were going to camp. But Moshe said, see your salvation today. This is done before the sun has set. See your salvation today that Yahuwah does for you. They had traveled that morning. They set up camp. No, you're traveling through the Red Sea tonight. Pick up your camp, travel. They went through the Red Sea. That's 24 hours of travel. Pregnant ladies, young children, grandpas and grandmas, men, animals, all your livestock traveled for 24 hours virtually. They needed rest. What did they do when they come out of the Red Sea? They were singing praises to Yahuwah. That was a seventh-day Sabbath. They were not traveling. What were the ladies doing? And this is specifically for the men. What were the ladies doing? The ladies were up singing and dancing to Yahuwah. Men do not travel very far when ladies are up singing and dancing, believe me. It was the seventh-day Sabbath, the day of rest. They had traveled for 24 hours. They had to have a rest. Not just the people, the animals too. Yahuwah knew that. That's your first example of a seventh-day Sabbath starting at dawn in Covenant Torah.
Okay. Good.
So all these things had to be established first in perfection before we could determine what day the new year was, so that we would understand when the Teshuvah shadow sign was. That's all these things established. That's how we can count out to what we finished today, the count to the second year in the wilderness. That's how we understand that the Teshuvah shadow sign was on a preparation day, so that Moshe could lay the foundation for the tabernacle with precision according to this straight line shadow, so that on the seventh day Sabbath, the tabernacle could be raised in perfection according to Yahuwah's will. That's the importance of the shadow.
Okay. All right. And what do you mean when you say that the scripture statutes ensures that Passover was on the third cycle week? Are you talking about this studying the what you just explained, basically?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you mean?
There's very specific statutes that must be upheld for a Passover. If any one of those are slighted in any way, then what you have must be thrown in the round file. It must be
When you say statute, you mean a procedure? What do you mean?
procedures,
Yes.
commands, time.
Yes, yes.
Instructions.
Yeah,
Instructions.
instructions. Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
And I think, Tim, Acts 7:22 really is important at this point in time, if you want to elaborate on that. Acts 7:22.
Acts 7:22. Thank you. Let's read that. Acts 7:22. We have been taught that everything from Mitzrayim is sin and is evil. Well, let's read Acts 7 verse 22. And Moshe was instructed in all the wisdom of the Mitzrites, or the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and works. Yahuwah had Moshe preserved in the Nile, preserved in Egypt, raised as a future prospect for a pharaoh. Moshe's training was second to none. He had the absolute best of the land. He knew the civil economy. He knew the religious situations. He knew everything about Egypt inside out and backwards. Did Yahuwah have him trained in a serious blunder? No. Moshe was trained specifically in the 360-day year seen in the Malapin tablets that was initiated by the shadow sign. Moshe knew that clearly. He he had Moshe trained in that way. So in Exodus 12:2, when he said, "This is the first month of your year to you," Moshe did not have to go back to his books and go, "What's happening here? Where's the phase of the moon?" No, he was trained in the wisdom of Egypt, Mitzrayim. He knew that calendar inside out and backwards. It is that system, the 360-day year, the 30-day months, that Moshe extracted the Hebrew nation out of Mitzrayim and brought them to Mount Sinai.
What was the calendar in Egypt at that point?
Their civil economy operated on the Tekufa and the Teshuvah shadow sign.
360 days a year they had.
360 days, years. That is seen in the Mul-Apin tablets very, very clearly. It's documented there that the heliacal rising of the stars, that is the appearance of a star after it has gone out of view through the year, when they see that star again, it's documented each day through many years. These stars are documented each day on which day of the year it arose. If you operated on a lunar calendar, that date would be all over the board. If you operated on a 364-day Zadok, Essene, Qumran, you get it, calendar, that date would be all over the board. It would be construed. It was not. The documentation of when the heliacal raising of these specific stars is 1 day of the year for years on end. That can only be a 360-day year governed by the Tekufa Teshuvah shadow sign. There is no other way that can happen.
Okay, I'll take your word for it, because I don't understand it right now. You know, I don't have any any information about that, or do the calculations, but I'll take your word for that.
But Maria, you would understand that the pyramids in Egypt do mark the day of the equinox. And of course, those pyramids were there. Basically, they were raised up by Joseph. And this goes into priesthood study. We don't have that study to present, but with our research, those pyramids were raised up by Joseph. Joseph was taken down into Egypt for a very special reason. It was all a part of Yah's plan. And Moses was trained. He knew when the year began. Those pyramids are still standing today. I would, love to be there on that day and see that shadow. Okay. So Moses knew the beginning of the year. He was trained that way.
If the beginning of the year was the same for the Egyptians, since they were also waiting for the shadow. The shadow also indicated the end of their year. Then why did Yahuwah tell Moses that this is the start of the year for you and not for the whole of Egypt? Anyway.
Because Moshe was extracting the Hebrew nation out of Egypt. Mm-hmm. He was removing them. Why? Because when the civil economy of Egypt operated on the Tekufa or the Teshuvah shadow sign, they also had a lunar-based calendar by which they worshipped. They were also worshiping in syncretism, where you take pagan ways and you adapt them into your worship system of Yahuwah. Moshe was extracting the Hebrew nation out of that pagan system. I don't know. Did I explain that good enough there?
Yes, sort of as if you're taking your calendar with you now. This calendar, you're taking it with you outside Egypt, and you're bringing it into the wilderness and into the promised land. Sort of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Moshe, you received your training in perfection from Israel now, or from Egypt. Now it's yours. Now you are extracting my nation, Yisrael, and you are to guide them according to how your training has been in Egypt.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Good questions, though. Very good.
I I watched it and rewatched it and rewatched it. I told you it has to make perfect sense. Otherwise, I cannot continue. I cannot go on. A question stays stuck into my head. I have to, I have to have all my answers, all my questions answered. Otherwise, I cannot relax.
Good.
The other important thing about this Passover from Egypt and this count, this 50-day count to Shavuot, is that you have to get through month 1, and then you have to count month 2, and that manna week is in there in month 2, and that has to fit. Oh my, if that isn't a puzzle. So it's quite a puzzle. That whole story of that Passover from Egypt and counting that Omer count is where covenant calendar just shines. And we cannot forget that during this time, Joshua is sort of in training boots right beside Moses. He's with Moses all the time. And he's the one that takes over when Moses dies. Joshua has some really big boots to fill. And I'll tell you what, the Joshua study, he just puts it all together. It is just amazing what happens in those first 5 chapters. So I see that Joshua was in training. He was well trained. Moses knew it, and he took over. But it was after
Is it our
that
next presentation, Joshua?
Yeah.
Great. All right.
Joshua was
basically,
the type of Savior. He was the type, the pattern that Yahusha had to fulfill. Joshua brought the people into the promised land, Canaan. Yahusha will bring his people into the promised land, Yahuwah's kingdom. So Joshua laid the pattern. Yahusha said, I did not come to destroy, but I come to fulfill. Yahusha's example, his sandals must duplicate seed within a seed, Joshua.
Yeah.
If Yahusha does not duplicate that which what Joshua exemplifies, there's a serious problem.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Okay. I won't ask that. Okay. The first week of creation, on the 4th day, does Yahuwah say that now the sun is responsible for the timekeeping, for the years and the weeks and the days? And is it there? Does he say that?
Not in those exact words, but when you look at the Hebrew definitions, it shows that very, very clearly. When you look at the definitions, the situations that are applied to the lights.
You mentioned that on our first interview, Tim, and I remember it when you said that the 4th day signifies the the appointment,
the commission.
The commission, yes. Thank you. The commission.
Yes. Kim mentioned that the lights were commissioned. They were given their commission on the 4th day. It was established permanently for eternity on that 4th day. The lights were already made in Genesis 1:1, already there. But their commission, their purpose, their reasoning, their design was established permanently on day 4. There was no creating done on day 4. Nunzer.
I remember. Yeah.
I'm just going to take that back to Jeremiah 33 because Tim did read verse 20 and 21. But if you go down to verse 23 of Jeremiah 33, it says, "Then says Yahuwah, if my covenant is not with day and night, and if I have not appointed the ordinances of heaven and earth." Okay, so those ordinances were appointed. Okay, so like he said, everything, that verse, that first verse in Genesis 1:1, you could spend 20 years on it. There's so much packed into it. It's not just a verse that's a prologue, that we're going to have a creation week. There's so much more to that verse. But that's where all of these heavenly bodies had ordinances that were given to them, very special ordinances, including the moon. The moon had special ordinances as well. But that was all covenanted. Yahuwah promised. He said, those ordinances are not going to pass. You can trust that. And that's just, a little nugget there, just to maybe help you understand. And then we haven't done Genesis. I'm not sure. We're going to finish the Passover question first, and that will take a while, and then maybe we'll go back to Genesis, because we haven't done Genesis verses 1 and 2 that are going to lay a really huge foundation for your questions that you have right now.
All right. Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
personally working on a PowerPoint that has over 300 slides at this point on Genesis 1 to 19 at this point. There's over 300 slides. They are
Wow.
detailed.
Mhm.
Okay. Maybe we should have a weekend for that.
Yeah.
A conference. Can you please tell me why first fruits need to be observed within the Passover week? Not the Passover week.
Unleavened bread.
Yes, unleavened bread.
Well, that is Joshua's example.
Yeah,
The next step.
we'll do that, Joshua.
Remember we said Passover
So
was on.
you'll give me this answer next on our next your next presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
Remember we said Passover was on a seventh-day Sabbath. That by statute, the wave sheaf must be performed on the first day after the seventh-day Sabbath, by statute. And Joshua exemplifies that with absolute perfection in detail. Yahusha, he must follow that pattern. He must. When did Yahusha observe the wave sheaf festival? When did Yahusha present himself as the first fruit? That's the sheaf of wheat. When did he present himself as the first fruit in the courts of heaven before Yahuwah? 3
days after he died.
There we go. Within the feast of unleavened bread. That exemplifies, or that fulfills Joshua's example, what he did. So there's a seed within a seed pattern. Yahusha fulfilled that pattern.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. And my last
But-
question, and I'll let you go. What?
Yeah,
What's your
just a
name? Yeah.
second. But what we do in Joshua the next time, that's going to be kind of the beginning, because this is huge. We won't be doing the gospel portion next time, but like we said, the gospel has to align with the Torah. So this is huge, but Joshua is going to break it open. That's where you begin. And then there's other studies that show why it is that way, why that first fruits or wave sheaf cannot be outside the week of unleavened bread. So we'll start on that. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Okay. And my last question, and thank you all very much for your patience with me. I have many questions. Somebody who follows the Zadok calendar and watched our previous your previous presentation, he told me he doesn't understand your argument, Tim, that the manna week blows, open the Enoch and Zadok calendar, because there is no the manna week doesn't find the seed on the creation week according to Enoch or Zadok, because he told me that Zadok and Enoch, people who follow these calendars, other calendars, they also believe that day one, creation day one, is day one of our week. The time starts in day one in creation, and the fourth day is just the beginning of time. It's just another work of Yahuwah, time, but time for us, the civil, let's say, a calendar may start on the fourth day, on the fourth creation day, but time in general, the week starts on the first day. So there you go. That's your manna week there. Even for them, they have a 7-day week, but they also.
So they apply great importance to the equinox day to determine their calendar. Of course, they place it near a moon somewhere. They say, "Oh, no moon for us."
No one has told me that. No one is aware of that.
Oh, who's
following these calendars.
You're going to enjoy the information that we can bring to you, because we all have it in writing. It's in writing from their promotion, from their calendar, from their explanation, in writing by them. We went over that yesterday very, very clearly. Anyhow, they apply great importance to the Tekufa, the circuit of the sun by which the shadow is drawn from. Why is it when the sun has started that Tekufa circuit on the first day of creation, why is that discounted for 3 days? And they start.
That's my question. That's why I contacted you, guys, because that was the one thing that never made sense to me. Why are you waiting for a Wednesday after the shadow, the equinox?
Okay, you have a 100-meter sprint, but we're only going to start at the 25-meter mark just because. But it's still a 100-meter sprint. Does that make any sense? No. It's not a 100-meter sprint if we're starting at the 25-meter mark. You cannot judge time by the Tekufa circuit if you don't have a Tekufa circuit, if you don't go by when it starts and it ends. Ecclesiastes 1:5. Here it is. Wow, we'll turn right to it. Love it. Ecclesiastes 1:5. The sun rises and the sun goes and hurries back to where? To the place where it arose. Point of origin, so point of departure, returning back to point of origin, a completed circuit. How can you judge time if you don't have a completed circuit, Enoch? How? Yahuwah does not start halfway through anything.
Yeah. Now this verse you read opens a whole new chapter for me, because that verse there from Ecclesiastes always bothered me. Why does it say it hurries back? The sun's supposed to have a constant speed. Why does it say it hurries back?
Hurry might not be a good translation. It is on a mission. It has a purpose. Nothing will deviate it from that purpose. It is focused on getting back to the point of origin.
Okay. I'll try to find the Hebrew word for that, hurry.
Okay, yeah, I should do that too.
Okay. All right.
That verse there also eliminates any lunar calendar whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. Eliminates it right there. When you apply the 360-degree completed circuit, as is Yahuwah's designation, when you apply that to when you take the lunar application of a 29.5 day circuit their Metonic cycle month, when you apply that to that verse, it falls in a million pieces. It cannot apply. The Metonic 29.5 day lunar month is blown out of the water by that verse.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry.
Okay. So, Charlene, Kim, anything to add before we finish this? We wrap this up.
No, I think that your first question that you had about this placement of Passover is really an important one. And if we can continue on that vein and show you all the examples that we have found, just like we said right at the very beginning, if there's one problem with a calendar that doesn't align with Torah, then it has to be questioned, because there can't be one problem and it has to align with the Gospels. And I think that's the most important thing that we can all remember. And once you go through that, then the question is, well, what's the rest of the covenant calendar going to show us? Because it's so beautiful, it's so easy, and yeah, it's just so easy. And that's what Yah said. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. Yeah.
Kim?
I had a thought of just, there is absolute truth. There is, and it if there's one piece of evidence that's not matching the Torah and the witness, to the Torah and the witness, if it does not speak of this, there is no dawning of day, there is no light. And truth is absolute and is full of all truth and no pieces of falsehood.
Amen.
There's no falsehood in him and in his ways.
Okay. Okay. We should end this recording, and then we should arrange our next recording.